Okay. So as I said, we'd like to thank you for being here. This is our second talk of our fall season. We have 2 more upcoming, so we hope that you'll visit our website and sign up for those as well. Um, I need to tell you that our events are made possible in part by grants from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, the Sherman Foundation, the Pierre and Tanya Matisse Foundation, and other foundations and individual supporters. We would also like to acknowledge that MGC is located in Lenape-Hoking, occupying traditional lands of the Lenape people. Our print shop stands 150 feet from what was originally the largest walking route used by the Lenape. We acknowledge and honor the people who originally lived here. Komikka would like to have a conversation with all of you. So following her presentation, we're going to open up to questions. So you have 2 choices. You can, raise your hand if you'd like, and we'll unmute you and you can ask your question face to face, or you can type your questions into the chat and we'll get to them from there. It's your choice. So about Komikka, Komikka Patton is a 2D media artist based in New York City. She uses ballpoint pen, ink, paper, and assorted printmaking techniques to create works that center on the African diaspora and human condition. Her large paper installations and collages touch on futurism, transhumanism, mythology, and storytelling. She creates portals looking into possible futures and collapses space-time into realms in which Black women are gatekeepers to different dimensions, all while balancing critical race theory and the ethos of contemporary American culture, thereby contemporary global culture. Patton's work explores personal, cultural, familial, and communal cycles of experience and solutions for transforming negative stereotypes and attributions into positive ones using artistic and holistic methods of healing. Patton has been featured in exhibitions at the World Trade Center and has been reviewed in Hyperallergic and Friend of the Artist magazine. She had a solo show at the Nina Contemporary Art Space in Chiang Mai, Thailand in 2018, and has exhibited in numerous galleries across the US. She is the winner of the Darryl Chappelle Foundation Grant 2020, a finalist for NYFA Artist Fellowship 2020, and a recipient of the May and Samuel Rudin Foundation Scholarship 2017. She earned her BFA in Fine Arts from Columbia College in Art and Design in Ohio in 2016, and an MFA in Studio Art from New York University in 2018. Patton writes about her work. The work features pen and ink collage moments, scenes, and possibilities meeting at an equilibrium of contentment, deep understanding, and acceptance. Each piece highlights the beauty of claiming one's identity, history, traditions, and reconnecting with something ancient and divine, such as tattoos, body modification, head wraps, and sacred imagery. On closer inspection, the work transitions to a moment in time, a moment of action, a split-second occurrence of surrounding to the unknown, experiencing and rejoicing. My work utilizes layering to couple the mystical to the grounded, often weaving in slivers of African tradition, symbology, and recurring motif of the sacred feminine to help bring ancient archetypes, particularly Divine Mother, and stories of empowerment, courage, and serenity. My works cycle maternity and explore futuristic utopias that only exist out of processing and understanding conflict and growing from once traumatic places. Honoring the human experience and condition, honoring the balancing of healing, growing, and coming to terms with self and interpersonal relationships, the reimagining and recurrence of symbols in the work is of vital importance. Iconography that grows with repetition and reapplication allows the audience to connect several micro narratives to arrive at an otherworldly destination that looks both foreign and familiar. We come to recognize and know these faces and places, bodies that become mirrors to our own experiences, depicting the pleasures of reflecting, remembering, cell-memorying, and activation. These pieces become our hype men, encouraging meditation and stillness. Cut paper, drawing, printmaking, and layering allows me to explore the phenomenon of existence, of consciousness, subconsciousness, collective consciousness, and collective unconsciousness. Through these skills and techniques, the unimaginable becomes tangible, time, perspective, and the place behind infinitely expanded. No longer limited by conventional means, the avenues and roads to restorative and curative ways of living are revealed. And what I'm going to do, you'll give me a moment, I'm going to share my screen. And where is that window? Oh dear. You know what? I had your presentation up and I think I closed it. I'm sorry, folks. I have to. What did he do?
Why do I not have any sound? Are they just being really quiet?
Mm.
It's supposed to be on there.
You have sound.
Tyco. It's connected. Okay, this should be off now. Yeah, okay, I turned that one off.
Just a reminder to people who are joining, you may need to mute yourselves. You're not automatically being muted.
On the Tyco. It says it's connected, but it's not doing it. Let's disconnect it and try it again.
Robin, you may need to mute the people who are joining.
You know, I'm trying to find the what I did with that presentation. It looks like I closed the window by accident.
Oh, this is fucking annoying. And you meeting, mute audio, start video, preferences.
I'm sorry, folks.
There we go.
Locate this presentation.
Okay, I can at least listen to it now.
So to the new folks joining, we just need to mute.
Am I not muted?
Okay, sorry about that. Here we go.
Okay, here we go. Hi, I'm Komikka. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I'm glad that everything worked out and the presentation did pop up and come up. But yes, my work is about creation and destruction in that process. work that shows the fluctuations of this human experience, personally my own human experience, the spinning of the coin, the action of creating and destroying simultaneously, hence drawing, collage. Also this gray space, the gray space of the infinite combinations of the binary, particularly with black and white. Saying that I also mean the rotation of the earth, the process of remembering why we exist here on this plane and why this planet, plane, rock, mother is our home. You can go to the next slide. I think it's a little frozen. Okay, there we go. So I am typically a drawer and collage artist, but I do use printmaking as well to kind of create pattern. And so I wanted to start off with a work that I created in 2016 and why drawing. Why do I use such a fragile material? And thinking of drawing as fragile, such as the paper is super delicate, even the materials that we use to draw with, such as pen runs out of ink, pencils break, brushes need to be maintained and cared for strategically. But with drawing, which is the fundamental of most art making processes, drawing as rawness, as pure, as authentic expression, for painting, for sculpture, and even for printmaking. Drawing offers a vulnerability, a very revealing process. What I mean by revealing is paper is extremely temperamental, meaning that if you lay down a line and you erase that line still is there. There's a trace of that line. And even you erasing, you are now interrupting the integrity of the paper, which means there is some form of a trace of that action of erasing. And so the history of everything that you do stays within that paper. So this piece right here that I'm showing is actually a detail of a piece that I did for my BFA thesis. I kind of have this presentation in chronological order. And I'm using relief printing for the hands, thinking about that redoubling, thinking about that multiple, thinking about using the matrix, using the tool of printmaking to create many. You can go to the next slide. Oh, you may be frozen.
It's showing up on my screen. Maybe it's just slow.
Oh, there you go. A little
Yeah,
slow.
it's just slow.
As I was saying, there is a life to paper, such as the changes in weather affect the paper. If it's too humid, the paper has like a bit of life. It starts to bubble, things start to peel off. If it's dry, the paper starts to crumble, depending what type of paper you're using. And so, thank you so much. And even like I said before, even how hard you press into the paper, you are literally inserting yourself. Even thinking about printmaking, the pressure that you use to emboss into the page, I guess, adds to the piece, adds to the aesthetic, but also the intention. Drawing, like most art practices, invites this reclamation of evolution, while also being able to bear witness to all the changes, as I mentioned before. They will always be apparent. Once a mark is made, that mark is always there, even post-erasing. Drawing allows a type of freedom, this non-precious material that can be elevated to fine art or easily disposed of with care. You're able to not worry about the act of making, because at the fundamental of it all, you're still using a pen and paper or a pencil and paper, contact and paper. So you're able to be super sketchy or super realistic. This allows for infinite exploration, the joy in the creation and destruction process, simply being in the joy of making. Paper offers us so many possibilities. So these two pieces, or this piece that I've shown twice, is called A Nigger's Relationship with God. And in this piece, I'm experimenting with blue ballpoint pen, black cut paper, black micron, as well as the traditional relief process. Also, the wood planks on top are relief as well. And so in this process, or during the series, I am thinking about the the heaviness of the Black experience. So my earlier work was really focused on understanding the Black experience being a Southern girl and understanding my own personal experiences with being a Black femme identifying woman or identifying person. Go to the next slide. Thank you. I wanted to show this piece also in new context. Because it is paper, things constantly change, which is why I'm really attracted to paper installation and collage and drawing, is that there's this sense of expansion that is happening. In this piece, I'm also thinking about the author, the audience, and the characters having a sort of conversation on a quest together, discovering together, digging in history, digging in the future, digging in the present to discover treasures, to discover connection, the connection that bridges all those, or those three elements together, meaning the essence of why things repeat. What is the essence of certain trauma cycles? What is the essence of certain healing cycles? And what's so attractive about printmaking is that you're able to repeat over and over again. That is the act of print making. And so through that process, why am I repeating? You can go to the next slide. This piece here is part of that same series of 2016 at Columbus College of Art and Design. This piece is called Woes of a Negro. And this piece, very literally, I became attracted to the ghost print, right? We all are familiar with that, at that moment of having a matrix and not inking up that matrix for the second print or third print, and et cetera. So I wanted to use the tool for what the tool is meant for. Each medium has its own capabilities and limitations. And I wanted to use relief printing in this particular because I wanted those dark, rich blacks, heavy blacks, but I also wanted those super light, almost fairy-like grays. You can go to the next slide. And here I'm just showing you different perspectives of that piece as well as that piece in the studio. So you can also see how this piece morphs and changed from being in a studio to being installed multiple times. You can go to the next slide. This piece is also a part of that same series of 2016. Once again, a picture on the left is in a gallery space. The picture on the right is in a studio space. Still using relief, also using a bit of laser. These are EBT cards. Piece is called "Don't Sell All the Food Stamps," and so I'm using relief, laser, and also lithography. The feet that are hanging down are also a form of printmaking as well. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so this is my first year in New York, my first year attending NYU. And particularly as an African-American female artist, there is a reclamation of space when disrupting white space with Black ink, Black paper, and Black faces, almost a peaceful violence. An almost cathartic experience of disrupting spaces. Self-portraiture became so significant because I wanted it to be known that I was disrupting spaces, not just any Black person, not just any Black girl, not just any being, but very much Komikka, possessively taking over. There was no mistaking me for anyone else. Self-portraiture became my way of not only leaving my mark through a signature, but leaving my face. The audience has to meet me face to face, even without me physically being in the room. They became my very own watchers, the remains, my stand-ins. Self-portraiture, became a way for this physical body to be silent and have these other versions of myself be able to speak, possibly versions of myself that didn't have room before. I made sure to carve out space for my anger, for my sadness, for my joy, for my lust, for my disgust, and for my peace. And so within these pieces, The one on, it's two different pieces. The one on the left, I'm using a bit of relief from the figures that are kind of floating above in this kind of black mass. I'm also using relief in the hands that are kind of closer to the figure that's kind of holding up a peace sign. And on the bottom, using relief wood carving for these bottles of water. These pieces were in direct conversation with the protests that were happening, particularly in Flint, as well as George Floyd. On the right, I'm using a bit of relief in the flower crown on the head, as well as some monotype prints that are on the bottom. There are two figures that are kind of split in half, kind of interrupting this space with thought. There's also stitching into this piece. There's gluing, there's cutting, there's tearing. I wanted to make sure that I am adding creation and destruction into all of my pieces. You can go to the next slide. So I kind of go on this wave of being super infatuated with collage and then kind of taking a step back and going back to my fundamentals, going back to the foundation of drawing, falling back in love with drawing techniques. So like I said before, drawing is so interesting because you can go sketchy, realism, hyperrealism, photorealism, illustrative, super fast, super slow and detailed. You have all of these in between, all of these gray spaces that you can then create an image that says exactly what needs to be said. It can be a realized cluster of thoughts or a narrative or just a simple moment. It's a space where things are worked out, similar to writing. If anything, writing is drawing and drawing is writing. During this time, I was interested in breaking the boundaries of what it meant. Oh, excuse me, I'm getting a call. Here we go. Am I back? Yes, I'm back.
You're back, yes.
Yeah. During this time, I was interested in breaking the boundaries of what it meant to be a Black artist, not creating work centered on trauma, but instead a quest of finding inner peace and understanding, no longer fighting against stereotypes or perspectives that didn't align with a prosperous future. Particularly with these pieces, as I was attending my second year, getting my MFA, I had Derek Adams come into my studio. He saw these pieces, and during this time, I was still very much in the state of really analyzing history, thinking about traumatic moments, and wanting to put them on in white spaces. And Derek Adams said to me, he said, "Why don't you draw the futures that you want to see?" And that was a very pivotal moment for me because I didn't know that I was reliving trauma in the sake or for the sake of creation. And so with these pieces, they were groundbreaking for me because that's when I started to really step into that possible future quantum physics space. You can go to the next slide. So this piece is also a part of that series. This is called Where is My Mother? And so I did want to read a bit of what that MFA thesis was about, just to give you a little bit of insight on who Mother is, and I'll break that down in a second. So, Mother used to scream, and when I heard her, chills came on my skin. I have often awakened at the dawn of day by the most heart-rending shrieks. I've never known if it's from pain or pleasure, seconds before death or orgasm. The louder she screams, the more I blacken. No words, no tears, no prayers from her victim seems to quiet her piercing screams from its haunting purpose. And the scream is all over, strained or fragile till strong and then strained again. A timeless song. It ruptures, stops, and then starts again, echoing and redoubling again, again, and again. A summoning and eradicating of realms, songs of peoples in futuristic and lost places that insert pauses, fast forwards, and rewind, where X marks the moment, the bomb and shelter, screams that manifest into depictions that ink, cut, remember, and bridge past, present, and future, death, life, Black, and time, X. An immortal melody that converges at the intersection of awareness, alien abductions, power, and emancipation. set on a post-apocalyptic stage where Blackness is capable of existing without white. Mother used to scream, and when I hear her, I urge to scream back. Mother kind of was birthed from a trip to South Africa. Through this trip to South Africa, it was my first time leaving the country, and I brought back this beautiful mask. This mask lived in my studio, actually right above this piece. As I would enter and leave my studio, I became very intimate. We would hold conversations. I would say, hi, mother. I would say, bye, mother. This mask became a symbol of the divine feminine. This mask became a symbol of my own mother, as well as myself. This mask became my connection to Africa, also the motherland for me. And this mask also became this very cosmic mother in sorts. So in these series or in these pieces, mother is this overarching archetype that is both nurturer, protector, as well as authority figure. You can go to the next slide. After these pieces, mother kind of inserted herself in my work for a year and a half. So after my MFA thesis, I actually made a comic book dedicated to her, Further diving into the mother archetype, healing mother wounds, understanding the mother of divine feminine in all things, deepening understanding with my own feminine vessel and identity, the many wounds that allowed me to be here, thinking about mother in not only my biological mother, not only my mother of blood, but also those acquired. Thinking about Mother Earth, as I mentioned before, Mother Universe, the many cosmic mothers and goddesses from many traditions, such as Yoruba, Hindu, also Buddhism, and investigating the links and connections between different divine feminine energies and their creation and destruction qualities, seeing why I was interested in creating as well as destroying my drawings, and also recreating again, thinking about that life, death, life cycle. You can go to the next slide. So these two pieces, when they do pop up, are pages within the comic book, thinking about this reoccurring presence to the mask, this divine feminine in the everyday. So what you're witnessing is the mask in front of the train as I'm waiting for the subway, as well as me getting ready to bathe and the mask kind of showing up in the bathroom with me. What I mean by this is, and why this is so important, is that during this time, I'm talking to my mother, and I'm realizing as I'm aging, I'm looking more and more like her, gaining more and more of her tendencies. And so the comic was kind of dedicated to thinking of our mothers outside of that mother space, thinking of them as women, thinking of them as people who were people before they became our mothers. So really humanizing the mother aspect. Also thinking about comic and bookmaking as printmaking, having a matrix such as, this PDF of all these scans, and then recreating and repeating that again and again. You can go to the next slide. And this is just more details of that comic. Also during this time and during the time of when Mother showed up, I was reading Fred Moten's In the Break, and I recommend that book to anyone who is interested in learning more about Black consciousness and also beautiful Black experience through a Black male's perspective who was extremely tied to his mother. This book, and particularly his way of describing, tracing, redoubling this bridge between, or the bridges in connecting different progressive or Black progression. Let me give you an example. He talks about the scream of a mother giving birth being similar to the scream of a mother losing her child being shot in the street. He talks about the similarities of a scream in orgasm versus a scream of witnessing death. And these screams or these sounds, these moans, being this bridge in which leaps past, present, and future. because screens will always exist. They are a very primal form of communication. And a very basic form of communication, thinking of babies having this only crying and laughter as their form of communicating with their mother or those that are taking care of them, being this kind of like bridge to Black progression. You can go to the next slide. So this is around 2019, I believe. I was doing a residency at Gutenberg Print Studio in Gutenberg, New Jersey, using printmaking as an artistic process that allows me to continue to create doubles, or create multiples, such as the coins that are at the bottom. I don't really consider myself a very political artist, but this piece was kind of during the time of political strife, right? So you do have Trump and Kanye in this piece, but this piece is dedicated to greed and talking about greed and corruption. So I'm revisiting old ideas. I'm revisiting the blue ballpoint pen. I'm revisiting black ballpoint pen and kind of seeing how I've grown. I'm always playing with the macro and the micro. Always going back to my foundations to see what I've learned from my foundation of drawing and how I can incorporate it into these larger pieces. Yes, we can go to the next slide. Oh, okay, here we go. And these are just some detailed shots of what's going on there. This is my first time actually using a digital printmaking process, such as manipulating an image in Photoshop and then printing it out multiple times and cutting it out. And I love that process right now. I do revisit it quite often now because it allows a quick and fast way of creating depth in my work and creating patterns. You can go to the next slide. This is the divine. You've seen this piece before, but this is an up-close view of it, as well as it in a different space, in a different environment. So you can see the relief. You can see also the mono printing. You can go to the next slide. Thinking about these divine beings bringing both creation and destruction, as I have mentioned before, I wanted to play with destruction more. I wanted to rip, I wanted to tear, I wanted to cut, score, and destroy. My art is about encompassing an experience, an entire moment that is inclusive of the good, bad, and the ugly, and to expose the ridiculousness of those words. They are only momentary perspectives. Thinking about what is considered ugly, what is considered scary, what is considered black and ugly. I'm getting all of these calls in the midst. What was I saying? And kind of flipping that on its head and making these very grotesque things quite beautiful. You can go to the next slide. So this is a detailed piece that I did for an art gallery in Milwaukee called 5 Point Gallery, I believe. They are one of the few Black galleries in Milwaukee in a very historically Black area that is being extremely gentrified at the moment. And so I'm glad they reached out to me and we shared space last year. So my art and through my existence is how I break boundaries. It is very revolutionary. Break what is expected of me as a woman of creation, as a person of the African diaspora, and as a person having a human experience, as a being simply existing. You can go to the next slide. So this piece is called We Are on a Journey, May Our Heads Lead Us Home. It is done with India ink on watercolor paper with Bristol and acetate. As you can see, I'm combining all of these different materials, combining the sculpture aspects from the hand, kind of leaving the background to kind of come towards the audience, to paper planes, to kind of having this moment in which the black essence or the black smoke is kind of coming towards the audience, really trying to create a moment in which the audience can kind of step through as if they are also engaging with these two beings or engaging with the. You can go to the next slide. So my work is in response to what is happening around me, my community. I draw me as well as my sisters in the conversations that we have, revolving around life and death, birth and decay, the seasons, aging, figuring out why my reflections come to me when they do and why they leave and why those reflections change. Drawing allows this rawness to be exposed. Collage adds substance and a layered action. Thinking of collage also as printmaking. I like to typically make a drawing. Maybe the acetate is that same drawing, but maybe with less details, such as a ghost print would be. And maybe that black paper, that shadow is a matrix of ink all the way up. Think about different ways we can have a printmaking conversation without using traditional methods. You can go to the next slide. This is just a more detailed shot of how those pieces were installed. You can go to the next slide. So this is one of the pieces that I have in the World Trade Center at the moment. This is called Conversations with Self. This is a detail of that shot. The next slide is a more expansive view. But I am always quite interested in the conversations with myself as well as other people who are also, I consider myself. And in this piece, I'm also going back to the idea of digital printing, such as manipulating a print via Photoshop and then printing it out several times. Go to the next slide, please. So there is about, I want to say 52 to 54 lilies in this piece, all also hand watercolored, very subtly, but yes. You can go to the next slide. Here I'm bringing back in a bit of relief with the adinkras that are on this cloth around the baby, as well as the woman, the mother, as well as some relief with the veve behind her, kind of encasing her in this halo. This piece was dedicated to particularly a Vudan energy, Azili Dento, and this is talking about those divine feminine beings, this protector of women and children, particularly of the LGBT community, as well as those who need a bit of guidance. I lost my words for a second. You can go to the next slide. And that is the detail of that same piece. Also thinking about how we see monoprinting. So I am thinking about when I'm doing these series of circles as also a form of printmaking, because it is a redoubling. It is kind of looking at or having a thought or idea and repeating it several times to see what come of it. Thinking about, once again, ghost printing and thinking about saturation of ink. You can go to the next slide. This is once again a revisiting of digital printing and manipulation. So using printmaking to create patterns to help me in the process of also creating symmetry. So this is a studio shot of me working on a piece for the World Trade that is in the next slide. So thank you so much for, very much honoring the Native American tribes that existed here in New York, or in this area before New York was New York. This is paying homage to the Shinnecock tribe and nation, as well as the Lenape tribe and nation. Using those pomegranates, although they are not native to North America, pomegranates are a symbol of divine feminine, that feminine energy, that red, that blood, and etc. Also getting back to using the matrix of my hands, the first form of printmaking, which is, laying the hands in the caves, laying the hands in ink, and kind of having that be your signature, your identity. I was here. Yes. Also on a photograph in color. This is one of the first times that in a long time, that I've incorporated color in a piece. Next slide. These pieces were shown in Swan Coach House. They're gonna butcher me for saying it like that, because I butcher their name. But this is one of my latest shows in Atlanta, Georgia. Going back to, once again, the foundation of drawing, thinking about mark making, thinking about my existence, this Big Bang theory of sorts. I like to think of each piece that I make as a moment of the all happening. What's so attractive about ink, what's so attractive about black and white, is that you start with this white space, or you may start with the black space. And once you add a drop of something else, it becomes something that was nothing becomes a something, if that makes sense. And so I'm quite attracted to that moment in which creation is sparked and creation is ignited. And I want these pieces, and my intention with these pieces is to have that shown. Using, once again, Bristol, watercolor paper, vellum, a bit of gold, 18 karat, playing with different types of paper, with different textures, as well as some paint. You can go to the next slide. This is from that same series. Still drawing my community, still drawing my sisterins, still drawing my reflections, playing with cowrie shells. If you've noticed, cowrie shells do show up quite often for me. For me, they are a representation of currency. They were used as currency at one point in time. They're a representation of my connection to Africa, and also to the African diaspora. My community wears cowrie shells quite often, and kind of this bridging, once again, this past, present, and future, as well as the divine feminine, a very yoni shape. You can go to the next slide. As I mentioned, as of recently, I've gotten back to using my hands as the matrix. Using my hands not only to, like I said, be possessive in white spaces, such as my black hands kind of interrupting this white space with the paper, but to create patterns, to see how much can I leave, how many traces of myself can I leave without destroying the matrix. You can go to the next slide. So this is the last slide that we have here, part of that same series as before at the Swan Coach House Gallery. And once again, I'm just finishing off with some beautiful circles, also thinking about printmaking, thinking about the act of layering, thinking about the act of drawing, thinking about the act of how to create an aesthetically pleasing image with using repetition and pattern. And that's all I have for you today.
Okay, so I'm going to stop the share. Thank you so much for that. I think your work is just beautiful.
Thank you.
And I guess now we can take questions. I'm going to look in the chat to see if there's anything there. No, so folks, if you have any questions, as I said, you can type it in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand and I will unmute you so you can ask for it face to face with Komikka. So I don't know, do we have any questions? Well, I guess I have a question. How so when you create these pieces of all the layering and everything, how do you decide what medium you're going to use for what? Is it just like intuitive, or do you have like a preconceived notion like that this is going to be a relief print and this is going to be pen and ink, let's say?
My process is extremely intuitive. I don't even sketch. I don't plan. My sketchbooks are filled with writing, which is, like I mentioned before, a form of drawing. And so I never know what I'm going to use as a print or what a piece needs even. As in the act of making, I decide, okay, I would like this to be a pattern, or I get some idea of this will look great with a halo, and if the halo had hands and or if the halo was bottles, and how can I create 50 bottles if I need a bottle? Do I want to draw 50 bottles, or maybe this would be a great time to use printmaking as the tool that it was created to be? So that's how I go about the process of choosing what is going to be what. I think that I like to keep my creation process joyful and full of dancing, full of laughter. And so if I have to think about, oh man, I have to draw this 60 times or 50 times, it's going to disrupt that peace, disrupt that happiness. And that's when printmaking comes into place. That's when printmaking is used to create something that would normally take me a week to complete, I can complete in a couple of days.
Okay, that's interesting. So I have a comment here from Kay McGee. I was so happy to see your talk today. Your work is fantastic. What is your preferred form of printmaking? Is it relief, or do you also use silkscreen?
I am so honored, Kathy. If anyone knows Kathy is my printmaking teacher from undergrad, and I had no idea she was going to show up today. I am so grateful. Thank you. My preferred medium, Kathleen, right now is relief. And I'm so honored to have you here. But relief, I don't silkscreen that often. In the past, I have used silkscreen to be on a piece of linoleum, so then that I would then carve. So using different processes of relief, or different processes, of printmaking to create an image. Yeah.
Okay. Cheryl Hochberg, I see you have your hand up. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just had a question about your studio. You talked about a lot about creation and destruction, and it seems like one theme that would go in with that is also like recycling, right? Like to take something apart, to put it back together, to make something new out of it. So I was just wondering what your studio looks like and how much you like reuse things, and like, you do an installation, you take it down, you save some things, you add some things, or is each of your installations just a whole new thing?
I have learned to keep all of my drawings. And part of the collage process was me having so many drawings around. I was like, okay, well, and all these drawings still have so much life, so what am I going to do with them? And as of right now, my studio is filled with boxes because I'm leaving. And I live, my studio at the moment is my living room. So this is where I water my plants. This is where I do meditation. This is where I store my work. This is where I am a lot of the time. And all of that time is kind of seeping into the art. All that, whatever I'm doing in my living room is kind of seeping into the art. And I'm really grateful for that, to have that home studio aspect. So yes, that creation and destruction process, I am constantly tearing and cutting and ripping and reusing. I like to think that that's my form of recycling, honestly. And I think I like that idea of adding so many layers you cannot see what it was before, almost as if it was a painting, kind of thinking of it in this painterly way of building. And sometimes you don't need a clean sheet of paper to build something that's going to be 50 layer seats. Sometimes you can reuse old drawings. Sometimes you can reuse scraps. Sometimes you can reuse things that would have normally been thrown away just to add depth and volume. I hope that answered your question. Thank you.
So Bruno wanted to know if you could tell us the author of that book that you had mentioned. I can put it in chat.
Yes, so it's Fred Moulton in the break. He's actually in New York City. He teaches at NYU now. He just won the MacArthur Genius Award.
Oh, wow.
I want to
Okay.
say he is incredible. And that book really helped shape and change how I see printmaking, how I see the process of tracing, how I see the process of creating multiples.
Okay. Can you spell his last name for me just so I don't misspell it?
It's going to be M-O-T-E-N.
I'm sorry, M-O-P-E-N.
E-N.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I'm going to put that in the chat so anybody
Nope.
that would like to follow up on that. Did I spell it wrong?
Yeah, it's spelled wrong. It's M-O-T as in Tom.
Oh, duh.
Oh.
Okay. I'll do it.
Yeah.
So M-O-T as in Tom, E-N. Okay.
Mhm.
K beat me to it. Okay, we have some other comments and questions. So again, from Bruno, beautiful work. How is the process of creating comics different from your other work processes? Do you plan to do more comics?
I get this question a lot, actually. That comic book took me over a year to do because I am such an intuitive artist that the act of planning a comic is really necessary. Page 1 kind of has to line up with page 20, right? And so doing the comic allowed me to get back down to the fundamentals of drawing. Some of my favorite artists are comic book artists because they are master inkers, master drawers, able to really see things from different perspectives. So if I will ever do a comic again, I'm thinking about it. But as far as the time and dedication that a comic requires, it kind of disrupts my intuitive process, because although the comic was successful and I was able to do what needed to be done, it took me out of, I really had to focus. Sometimes I'm working on multiple pieces at once, but that comic really took up a lot of my time. It was very like, head down, get the comic done. This is what I want to do. So, but I am definitely inspired by comic artists and just those master inkers.
So we have a comment question from Dorothy Cochran. Thank you for your wonderful work and talk. I love your drawings and the energy of the layering as you build the compositions.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So anybody else have a question that you'd like to ask Komikka, or a comment?
Hey, I just have a comment. Hi, darling. I really, well, this whole thing was very nourishing and delicious. And I really appreciate your comment about your studio being in your living room and how the things you do in your space just add to your art, because, you know, I feel like some people, sometimes my mind goes into this space, can become limited by like, I don't have a separate studio, you know, and I just really appreciated that perspective of you know, infusing what's happening where you have the ability to be, infusing what's happening around into that. So thank you.
Definitely, art is life. I try to encapsulate as much of my life in my art as possible. Like I mentioned, those conversations with friends, those conversations with sisterins. I draw my community for that reason. I really want people to see that this is just beyond, this human experience is beyond this simulation or maybe what we think it may be. And so having my work in my studio allows me to put life and really, and sometimes, you know, paper is precious, but I'm stepping on it sometimes. I can't quite get around it. Maybe, you know, I have to sweep it a bit because dust accumulates. And so very much life is ingrained in it.
Thank you. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay, so are there any other questions or comments for Komikka? You know, if not, I guess we'll kind of wrap this up. So thank you so much, Komikka, because this was just beautiful work. Really interesting to hear you talk about it. And we also want to thank everyone for being here. We suggest that you visit our website at manhattangraphiccenter.org for future talks and to see our current class offerings. You also can sign up for our email mailing list. There's still some time to sign up for some of our classes if they interest you. And I guess that's it. So thank you.
Thank you.